activity on the lake with the ice being there, huh?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
I see snowmobiles yesterday running up and down it. down
even
Third
had
Bay.
cars out there,
Oh, yeah?
Really?
yeah.
That sounds safe.
Jesus Christ.
Pretty thick ice
With
for
a
that.
changing level of the lake?
There's a few in the bottom of it too.
Yeah.
From back in the 40s and 50s. My father used to race motorcycles up there
Is that right?
in the early 50s,
Oh, my God.
late 40s. He used to have car races and motorcycle races up there. My mother had some pictures of it, yeah.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
There's a video out on YouTube about car racing on Highland Lake.
Is it?
Yeah.
Actually, about 23, 24 years ago, I was up in Greenfield, Maine, up there, and we're out snowmobiling with friends, and they set up a big track, quarter-mile track on the ice. As soon as it's 24 inches, they can get insurance, and I mean, they'll have 50, 100 cars parked out there. Concession trailers, selling food. and
Yeah,
everything.
you might as
Yeah.
well, right?
Out there racing, yeah, every weekend. Yeah, Moosehead Lake, yeah,
Yeah, man.
yeah.
Well, I used to, my grandmother lived in Plattsburgh, and I
Yeah.
built a house up there in the Adirondacks. But back then, and this is crazy, I was going there since I was 2 years old. But they used to, Lake Champlain used to freeze over, and they used
Used to
to
freeze
drive
over.
over to Burlington.
Yeah, you could drive across the, yeah, all the way, sure.
I don't think that's happening
No,
forever.
that hasn't.
It's gotta be time savings.
Well, no kidding, that's great.
Big time savings, yeah.
Yep. Changes, boy. So these are the, okay, there's two things, okay. Did Scott call at all?
Not that I'm aware of.
John?
Didn't hear from either. Charlene, we heard from, she wanted to make sure that the Cablevision setup was working correctly, but there's some, the link might be down. Glenn's working on it, so.
Okay. Holy mackerel.
Oh, wow.
Look at that time,
Yeah.
look at the
I took
time.
I took Charlene's seat.
Whatever you guys want.
Under the deadline, too.
Have John check that sheet too for his,
Yeah.
make sure those things are correct.
Any changes on there?
Any idea when they're gonna get the new audiovisual stuff in?
I'm not sure.
Oh, okay, I didn't know what type of time frame it was, so.
No. I should check on it, cause I wish I knew myself.
I don't think anybody knows.
No.
That's right. Yep.
All right, good, thank you. Okay, I've got 7 o'clock, so we need to turn something on, do we, or you're all set? Okay. So it's 7 PM on the 10th day of February, 25. I'm George Clausen, the chair, Pete Marchand is to my left, vice chair, John Cooney, secretary, Willie Platt, Adam Quaglioli. Charlene Lavoy is absent, excused. Rista Malanka is alternate. Scott Eisenlohr is not here, so we'll see what happens with him. We don't have any public, so comment, agenda review, anybody have anything they want to change or suggest additions? Okay, introduction of Jeremy DeCarly.
I'll just let Jeremy take it away.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jeremy DeCarli.
Can you get a mic?
Oh,
We're probably not gonna hear you without a mic online.
online they're not.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right.
Yeah, thank
You
you.
need to hold it close to
I
you.
tend to think I'm loud enough, but maybe I'm not for the folks that were listening on TV. So, as I started out, Jeremy DeCarli, I'm with Tyke Planning and Policy Group. Here assisting Jeff and his department in this time of transition without Lance after his departure. It's going to be filling in, doing some of the town planner roles. I think we're still sort of working out exactly how myself and our firm is going to fill in, but I think we'll be here for a little bit of time at this point. So I am a certified planner. I've been working in municipal government and regional COGS for about 15 years. also Casio and DEP certified. So, happy to be here.
How long's your firm been in business?
The firm itself has been around since 2021, early 2021. But the two principals that started it worked together at a firm prior to that for many, many years. One of the principals, I think, maybe 15 years or so. The firm that they had been at was bought out by a national company, and they just didn't see themselves fitting into that model, so they wanted to break out and start their own.
So how do you fit into the planning commission role, planning and zoning?
Here, I think we're working on figuring that piece of it out. In the immediate, I see myself sort of filling in as town planner in the office 1 day a week. So I'm here to help Jeff with his transition period and really just backfill the office at this point.
So what day is that?
I'll be here Thursdays.
Will you be attending our meetings then twice a month?
I will be attending your meetings, yes.
Okay. So we'll still work on the reviewing the agenda, et cetera, before the meeting, and if there's any packets, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
And Jeff has done a great job with enforcement here. We haven't had that for 30 years, so it's a big change. But anyways, and I think as you get to know everybody and however long you're gonna be here, you find that this commission is a nicely well-versed commission. It's, we got a lot of experience, with Rista, with your experience in Torrington, and now you're with the COG and so forth. So this is, it's an interesting position. Good.
And can I just add, so in our planning field, I've worked with Jeremy quite a bit. He's our AICP planning PDO, right? And so we've worked quite a bit, very well respected. I'm excited that he is with us. I've also worked with the principals of Tai-Chi. They're on multiple organizations with me, served on boards with them. I think it's a very good firm. I'm excited. They're a well-respected firm.
Good.
So I'm very happy that they were chosen to be here. And, yeah.
All right, good.
Thank you, Rista. Yeah, and just a little bit about the firm. There are 7 of us. There's 4 of us that are AICP and Casio certified, and then we have a couple of associate planners as well. So you'll see my face, but you get years and years of experience alongside of me and behind me.
Okay, thank you. And Scott Eisenlohr is now here, so, anybody on the commission have any questions for Jeremy? And we're supposed to, we'll appoint you to this position, I suppose. Is that what we're supposed to do?
So what I've asked here on the agenda is to appoint Jeremy as an additional CEO in town, just in case he needs to be signing off on anything and I'm not available, that kind of thing. If you want to appoint him additionally as, well, no, let's leave that. We'll just go with the CEO for now.
Okay. All right, so I'll make a motion to appoint Jeremy DeCarli as a CZEO, representing us, but working from the Tai-Chi Planning and Policy Group as an additional ZEO in town.
I'll second that.
Any discussion of the motion? All in favor? All right. We don't have any public hearings. We don't have any old business listed. New business, PZC 25-1, zoning regulation change application, Town of Winchester, proposal e-codification of current subdivision regulations. And 25-2 is zoning regulation change application, Town of Winchester, Connecticut, proposal e-codification of current zoning regulations, including any amendments and since adoption. So both of those would require a public hearing to review what we've got drafted, and so we need a motion to do that.
Can I ask a question before
Sure,
we
go
sit
ahead.
there? So one of the things that I've questioned with the regulations, so and I'm looking at the table of use. So we have permitted use, site permit, and not permitted. But under the permitted, there's usually site plan and zoning permit. And so it gives a little bit further definition of who should be approving it, whether it's the zoning enforcement officer and the town planner, or if it should come before this commission. Might this be an opportunity for us to go back and look, or are these, I'm just wondering what the background is on this? Why there's no zoning permit or allowed uses listed in the table of use? And if you don't have an answer for me today, that's fine, I just,
Oh,
if
thank
we're
you.
making,
That's
if we're
a good
making the
point.
change, it's something
Yep.
maybe we wanna look at.
To add it so
Add
that
it
we
to
can
it.
consider it, so.
Cause if this is right now, every single thing should come to the commission, I don't think that's what we intend.
So what's your suggestion? We could add a additional block here for that, just a zoning permit?
Yeah, so there might be some things that are allowed uses, and one might be, I would have to look at the regulations, but just as an example, maybe if there's somebody that has a home office, it's just them, and, no employees, no sign, that's allowed. They don't have to come for any permit. Then maybe somebody who wants to put on a deck or a small addition, if it meets the setbacks, that should be a zoning permit. Some of the more, commercial uses, those might be site plan that come to us for review, and then, of course, this special exception or special permit would require the public hearings. So,
Yeah, Rissa, that's a good note. I believe that is addressed in the body of the text, but to have it sort of pulled out for you in a snapshot.
Well, that is chart here
Yeah,
especially, yeah.
especially since this will really be the only snapshot now. You'll see when you review this, the cut sheet that I was calling it, that I always gave people if they were doing something or wanted to know what they could do in TCR, for instance. I would just give them that and they could see everything on there. But now we're gonna get a lot more use out of this table, so that's a good point.
Yeah,
And
you
we
could
could bring that up.
Put a number note next to it, like I use number 3, where you've got 1 and 2 in here, like under congregate residence, they've got number 2, which is required, city water and sewer required for that, so you could put like number 3, or 4, or whatever, and then have an index at the bottom, the last page, where it is now, just explaining what that means. Instead of having it in every square, put a
Right.
number there to reference it to.
Okay, can you include that information so that we could submit it or put it into the application?
Yeah, I'll bring that to their attention tomorrow to get that looked
yeah,
in.
and just like, accessory residential uses, those shouldn't be site plan. Some of those things, so maybe Jeremy can help you look at it and give some guidance, or if you ever wanna give me a call, I'd be happy to look at it with a fine-tooth comb, I haven't done that.
So how much time do you need to get the advertisements in for this?
Once the commission is comfortable to move forward, we'll just get it going. There's no set timeline on this.
So can we do it for the next meeting, or do we need to do it, say, a month from now?
Well, if you want to see these changes before you set it, we can hold off till the next.
Do we want to actually have a public hearing before we, as a board, get to go over this and discuss these things in here? Because a lot of these red changes, I don't know where they came from,
Okay,
and I don't agree with some of them.
okay.
And I think we need to, as a group, almost like have a work session where we sit down,
All right.
go over, compare what we had to what they're changing it to.
Okay, all right.
Because I know last time we were this, I went through and found all kinds of things that were just like,
Not correct, yeah.
not
Missing
correct.
Yeah, okay. Well, who put this thing together, this group that
The company,
you hired?
Yeah. The
Did they give a
Codification group.
justification for the changes that they made without it
Well,
being
so a lot of the
represented?
changes are, format driven. There are some text cleanup that went with it, as well as if part of our regulations were not in concert with state rule, they would make that kind of change. But what I could do is if you want to have a working session, I could find out if and when a representative would be able to come. I was trying to get Zach to come tonight. He had come to one of our previous meetings. He was already booked in Plainfield, I think. So he was unable to come. But I think that would go a long way to addressing any of the questions that you
Well,
have.
why don't we set it up for the next meeting and then get a hold of them?
One question I've got, what happens if there's an error after we approve these and they're in place? And somebody comes in, there's an error, there's something missing from the regulations. example, just found out last week, the ordinances which were approved 2 years ago. Open burning, there's a $10 fee in the open burning ordinance. When it was codified, that went away, it's gone.
Okay.
And a resident made the town aware of it, so I'm one of the open burning officials along with Jamie, and basically until the selectmen decide what they're gonna do with it, nobody's getting an open burning permit. But that had to go away because of codification. Because it was nothing that was changed by the selectmen or anybody else by changing the ordinance.
Well, I think if it's a Scrivener's error and you can prove that, you can make the change. But if it was a
Well, and, yeah,
change, if we vote on a regulation
something-
and we vote on something that's wrong.
but
we'll
that's
have to
something we
change.
need to know
Right.
before we approve these regulations.
The other thing, and I think, you know, the company that's doing this, I think that they probably have a lot of experience in making sure there's not duplication. But now that we have a planning agency on board that can help us look at some regulations, before we make all the changes and make them electronic, we've had a couple different public meetings with all of the different groups now, and two things that have come up, I think, at a couple of the meeting, is the way we handle non-conforming uses and making sure that the low-impact development regulations require maintenance and an engineered plan. So maybe we can look at those two things and do it all at once, so that when we do codify our regulations, we're not continually changing them, we can get those done at once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
And, you know, so I don't know who would work on those regulations, but, again, because I had attended those meetings, but many people did, I'd be happy to talk to you about what was discussed. I took some notes, some changes that we might want to propose.
Okay.
So, there's one thing here, under multifamily dwellings. Now,
What page are you on?
it's in the parking, it's in the zoning regulations, this sheet here. Multifamily dwellings. It's, now, it's like these, the school we just approved for affordable housing. That's a multifamily dwelling. They came before us, and I believe it was .75 parking spot per unit. Now, this calls for 1.5. So, we just approved something at 7.5. We have the hospital coming someday. They're probably gonna be looking at that same .75. So, where did the 1.5 come from?
Where are you?
This is the count I'm familiar with, the 1.5 plus .25 per guest space. That's what I always reference, 1.75.
Yeah. They
I
can-
don't recall exactly.
The school came through at .75 because I was doing the math in my head, I'm saying, who's gonna have 3/4 of a car?
Right.
And, you know, most of those units are probably gonna at least have one car, so they're gonna run out of parking real quick up there. But, I thought that was what it was legal.
I don't remember, do you remember how many parking places they had?
Not many,
Because it was like 30 units, wasn't it,
yeah,
in the building?
yeah.
And I'm not trying to change the world with this. I understand that it's
Oh, 35
in
units.
alphabetical order, but a lot of times it makes sense if you put all the residential uses together, if you put like-minded uses. So when you look at a restaurant, you don't have to look at the different types of restaurants. They're all kind of lumped together. You can say, oh, this one will fit best, or this one will fit best, you know, with residential uses, because there might have been, do we have an apartment? So there's congregate care, what's that? Dependent living.
Well, apartments, you got multifamily dwellings, so.
It's just multifamily, and then there's two-family, and then one family. That's all they say anything about.
But you're suggesting that you put residential considerations
Yeah, so
together?
single-family,
Kind of
two-family,
group them together.
multifamily, congregate, you know, assisted living, all together. So we know all of the residential uses that are allowed and what zone they're allowed in. You know, maybe all of the retail, I don't know, there's a couple different ways to categorize it. Industrial uses, but light-scale manufacturing, warehousing, kind of all together. So we know what those uses are. It just helps when you're talking to somebody at the counter and you can look at the use they wanna do in that general area
that
to say,
section, yeah.
oh, it might fit better with this one than this one, let's, you know.
Good point.
Congregate rather than say at .5.
All right, so, was that it?
I don't know, that depending on how you,
Yeah. Then the other thing, on marina parking, it's got one per 1,500 square feet. Now, is that 1,500 square feet in the building? So marinas typically should, I think it should be going by the number of boats that are in the water,
The number of slips.
the boat slips. You know, don't necessarily have to have one per boat slip, but you could have one per 2 or one per 3. But
Relative
for
to the-
1,500 square foot of building, you can have a small building that only requires one parking spot, but you got 30 boats. But they can't change anything up there now at the marina, but it could affect it in the future. If they come through with a big revival, change, and whole new plans, you know.
So, you know, if that or is a change that you want to entertain,
I mean,
We would have
there's a
to-
lot of things through like that, you know? Like, there's been, in my viewpoint, there's been a lot of things added to the HL zone.
have been added
Yeah.
by this group.
Well, I didn't actually go through it completely, but like, we have, home farming was added, I know that was added. Affordable housing was added. I think bed and breakfast was okay before. Convalescent nursing home, I don't know where that came from. Farm stand, farm winery, commercial greenhouse.
So some of those are coming out of Article 4 for special regulations. And actually, that's my question too, is it goes through each zone, and I see that we're now appendicizing the uses. And then it goes to common regulations, and then all of a sudden we're getting to special regulations, and we talk about uses under special regulations. And we're kind of
Do you want to,
double bookkeeping our uses.
you want to set
conflated
this up on the
regulations.
next agenda so we all sit down and go through these things and make our notes and then discuss this so that we can give you more information. But some of the things that you're bringing up makes a lot of sense to try to put like uses in the same cluster. But Willie, what you've been pointing out too, there's some variations, so I think we've really got to sit down and go through what's been written and presented to us to consider.
And I think too, I mean, even if it's in our current regulations, but it's not meeting our needs, or we think that it needs to be changed, now would be the time to do that,
That's
so.
a good point.
yeah, change it once.
Okay, so just to recap, we're gonna obviously carry this over to the next meeting. I'm gonna attempt to get representatives from the group to come in and discuss. And you guys will have probably a laundry list of issues to go through with them. Is that?
I think that's a good idea, so hopefully if we can control the agenda so that we can really spend some time on this and focus on it, because then we'll get some progress, otherwise it can go on forever.
Okay.
Some of our regulation changes have taken forever to put together, so. That okay with everyone?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Now, were the subdivision the ones that we saw last time?
Yeah.
And so did we schedule a public hearing for those last time?
No, we didn't schedule a public hearing. The thought process was to get these both on the same track.
And subdivision will be easier, right? I thought we talked about going with subdivision first.
That was the initial plan,
Yeah.
but if we're gonna
Do it all at
try
once.
to do it all, we might as well. But it's up to you. You know, if you guys wanna schedule the subdivision, we can separate them.
What's the thought?
Those are pretty minor, I didn't have any.
Okay, all right. How about you, Willie, you got any thought on that?
Like, those changes you can't do all at once.
Is that just a subsection of our regulations? Why is it separate?
No, it's a standalone, set of regulations, just having to a subdivision
Do you not
specific.
have a copy of that?
I had a copy of it from last time.
Any other questions with regards to this, so we know we're gonna bring it all together at that meeting and we'll focus on this stuff? So we'll move that to the next meeting. Okay, number 7 is A is discussion regarding the amendment of cannabis establishment regulations regarding the 200-foot prohibition rule to allow for commission flexibility in the special permit driven citing of such establishments and possibility of adding macro cultivation as a special permit use in the RR zone. I think there's two different issues there, so. My feeling is we should take this macro cultivation as a separate issue from what we're talking about with the already existing regulations with regard to the 200-foot property line to property line. But what are your thoughts as we go around the table?
I have thoughts this one.
Go ahead.
So, bear with me for a second, because I have a lot of thoughts on this. And especially, we attended the selectmen meeting a few weeks ago now, and there was a lot of concern over this type of use and allowing macro grow, because they feel that it has the potential to bring in a lot of revenue to the town and help, especially because we're a distressed community, and that means they have to have a social equity plan, which they feel will benefit the town. I believe that as these cannabis uses have come to light, and I've been up, in this land use field for almost 18 years now, so I've seen it when it was not allowed and come up, and some of the issues out in Colorado, and then in California, then when it came to Connecticut, some of those were worked out, such as, not being able to use banks and walking around with bags of cash. They found ways around that with debit cards. They found a lot of different solutions. When it first came out to this area, we were seeing that there was a lot of congestion with cars because it was new, so they had to have police and a lot of supervision. But we've kind of saturated the market. It's not as new now. We're really not seeing those issues. So back when retail and micro cultivation inside came, Winsted was one of the first communities that made these regulations. And when I was assistant planner in Torrington, we were looking to Winsted as a leader to what are they doing? What can we do? Is this something we want to do too? And so I think that not being on the commission at the time, but paying attention, there was a lot of regulations put in place to make sure that we were protecting the uses and the neighboring uses, and we weren't running into any of these big issues. And so now that we know what retail looks like, I think we can reduce some of those requirements. The 200-foot being one, I think what's written here is even too much. I think what we should be asking for applicants is to put any of those sensitive uses on a map within 200 feet and identify where they are, so that we can then use that to make our decision whether, in some of the language you had here, will not adversely impact the named uses or safety of the neighborhood. So we can use that, but not put all these other regulations. Just tell us what they are so we can look at them and make that decision. So I think that can be really simplified, and I think it's time to do that. I would support that. When it comes to macro cultivation, that is still new. There's only one in Connecticut. There's very few around here. I don't think we want to be the guinea pigs on this. So I think, like we did with the retail and the micro cultivation, we want regulations that are going to are going to give us the amount of control and discretion we want over permitting these types of uses. I said at the last public meeting, and I still believe this, that you know, having an overlay zone versus a special permit, it might be the way to go. And if the selectmen really believe that this is a good use for the town, and we believe that too, and we're gonna allow regulations, why would we limit it to just the rural residential zones? There was a lot of testimony about having it in the gateway zones and possibly some uses that might be P&I zone. So if we really believe that this is something we wanna do because it's gonna be good for the community, why not have to, right? If it's gonna be that good, why not make more opportunities for it? So first thing is I think we should look at what zones we really want it in, not just limit it, but also, for those of you who don't maybe know, and I'm not trying to talk down, but as a commission, there's like 3 levels of discretion that we have when we make a decision. When we're in, you know, a zone change or a regulation change, we're really creating the law, which gives us our highest level of discretion. We don't have factors like, you know, the special exception criteria that we have to follow. It's up to us. Is this consistent with our plan of conservation and development, and do we think it's good for the community? So with an overlay zone, we have our highest level of discretion. When you get down to a special permit, you have less discretion. You have to look at, you know, the conditions in the regulations, say, do they meet these or not? And if they do, you have to approve them. There is a little bit more discretion in what those criteria are versus a site plan, which is X number of parking spots, X number of trees, and so I believe, if we feel this is good, we should do it, but we should do it in a way that gives us the highest level of discretion because it's still new. 5 or 10 years down the road, or maybe even less, will they address ways to address odors? Will we understand a little bit more what criminal behavior might be around these? What if we were, you know, wildfires? We've had, you know, huge fire in Great Barrington. What if one of these facilities catches on fire? What's the impact to the community if that happens? What's the impact to the neighbors? You know, I worked in Torrington when there was a tire fire at Zeller Tire, and all those homes were condemned around it. There was major impacts. This might not have that same type of contamination, but it's a substance that alters your state of mind. What will that do to the neighborhood? If there's 5 acres of marijuana, we don't know yet because it's still too new. So I'm not opposed to looking at this again. I don't think it should just be by site or special permit. I think we should look at it over an overlay zone, and I think if we come to the conclusion that we do want to address this, we should look at all of the zones, not just the rural residential. And just to reiterate, I do believe we should look at these separately, and that 200-foot prohibition, I think it's time that we do remove that.
Good points. What do you think, Lou?
It's a hard act to follow.
Sorry.
The only request I have is exactly, I'm gonna went over this, lots of things, and somewhere I'm thinking, did we actually say it was a 200 foot from the boundary line, or we say 200 foot from the door to door? I know that was part of the conversation. And
Yeah, good point.
in regulation here, it says boundary lines. But when we signed off and we passed it after that public hearing, did we actually,
I think we went with boundary line, yeah.
we did? Because I
I
know there was a lot
believe- I
of
believe
talk
so,
about
'cause-
door to
Well,
door.
first of all, when we started this, when it came into law in Connecticut, I brought it to the commission and suggested we go to the Board of Selectmen to see what their position was, whether they wanted us to do anything at all. And they came back in favor of us doing something, so that's how we created this thing with the,
But then they actually changed the area and reduced Main Street, cut Main Street out of it.
well, they asked, in their correspondence to us, they asked it not be included in that. And so that's how that started to come forward. And, but I think that, first of all, I agree with Mr. as far as, these are 2 separate items, even though it's related. So I think we should talk about the retail as one issue, and then if we want to talk about this, you know, the growing and so forth, that should be a completely separate issue. And I agree with you about the overlay gives us the best considerations, and it should not be just limited to one particular zone. We don't have that many zones anymore.
Well, and if you look at the zones where you have 30 acres that are not developed that could be used for farming, other than they'd have to clear cut. You know, most of that is rural residential. You know, you don't have it in a lot of these other zones.
That's true.
You know, that's, you know, where you're talking, allow it in most of the zones, things like that. If you look at the maps that we have,
Yeah.
there just isn't the property there. So that's, you know, that was one of the reasons I'd suggested a long time ago about rural residential. These ones you got from Paul Harrington, these are some he got from another town or
What you see here?
proposed, right? These proposed ones that you had sent to us.
Oh, the two, yeah, I'm not
Their
not
emails.
sure who wrote those
Okay, I was just
for
wondering
him,
where they
but-
came from, who wrote those and what
Yeah,
have
I
you.
don't have the
or-
answer to that.
So, well,
Tonight?
no, go back 2025. They're old ones. January 2nd, they come back. I had something here. Don't know, lost my mind, lost my thought.
Get back to it.
I'll get back to it
So back
eventually.
to that,
Yeah.
that 30 acre, I was just looking for the other proposed. Didn't they say that they could only get a permit for, what was it, 5 acres, and then there was
200.
7?
Well, the state would only give them a permit for so many acres to grow, but they.
250,000 square feet of canopy. Depending on how it can be, doesn't have to be contiguous, so depending on how you use the area, efficiently.
Right.
You know, but that is a little over 5 acres of canopy.
Right, and so their proposal was 7 acres of fenced-in area.
It would have to be more than 7, that's for sure. I did some calculations
Look at you.
of, you know, if you were to maximize 250 square feet of coverage and you apply like an efficiency factor of amount of square area there is, and you gotta have walkways, pathways, areas for buildings and whatnot. Try to figure out how much area they actually do need, you know, with a setback distance. And I got some numbers here that I looked at. And in 30 acres, depending if you're gonna have a setback, it is down near, not minimum, but, you know, do we wanna have setbacks in neighbor properties? Do we wanna have setbacks to the frontage, you know?
Especially in a rural residential, you
Right.
want to have some
Yeah.
separation.
So, because the reason I was asking that question, I'm glad that you did that, is, you know, maybe instead of like just a strict 30 acre rule, maybe it's a certain percentage of the lot. You know, I don't know if that makes it
Yeah.
better or not, or makes it more complicated, but.
I'll add some of my comments. For the 200-foot, I think they may be conflating. You know, the 200-foot was, I think, geared towards an establishment for retail, not to be near daycare, school, what have you. But when you go and you conflate that to an operation where you're growing cannabis, right? Where is it most likely gonna be in? You know, farmland soils. And that's, you know, we talked about rural residential areas would have the farmland soils, you know, so it has the soil for that plant that needs it.
Yeah.
But that's, I agree, they should be completely divorced of whether it's
They
200
need to be
feet
separate.
of establishment for retail versus growing.
Yeah.
And I think we're also missing out on, you know, hybrid retail sales, micro cultivation, and there's no such thing as macro, it's cultivator versus micro. But then we're missing out on manufacturing, transportation, laboratory, those would require a building structure. You know, if Board of Selectmen would like to see return, you know, those require actual structures, you know. Cultivation is in essence a farm with a very significant security barrier around it, you know. I was looking at our existing regulations for telecommunication sites, so we have security barriers. And forgive me if that word is like scary, or you call it a fence, but it's a 12-foot fence and the intent is to secure the area. So, I looked at our telecommunications, regulations, and that has a setback distance from neighbor properties. And I think similarly, if we were to go down the path of cultivation, that I think it would be treated as a security barrier, you know? And that you should have a setback distance from your neighbor. The reason why is, why should a neighbor have to put up with someone trying to hop over the fence, you know? They come onto their property or go through their property to get to that fence, you know, it's not right. Definitely think issues should be separated. And it's actually distinct uses. I mean, the common theme is cannabis, but distinct uses is one is selling, the other one's growing. I look at also, I looked a little bit more into a farm, you know, anything farming, like natural farming. There's a setback distance of 100 feet for any item that has to do with farming, whether it's a chicken house or whatever. That's 100 feet. So I'm definitely not anywhere near in the realm of waiving a 200-foot setback and pushing it down to like, special permit based on one of ours, sentiment in the given time when we're past the permit. I think it should be hard to set in. But that's just my opinion.
Okay.
Well, and, I would agree with this, the setback, for growing, not for retail or for even micro cultivation where it's really in a building and contained. One of the things that kind of, I guess, I feel is mischaracterized as a farm, right? It is farming, right? You are growing something in the dirt. But if any of you have been a zoning officer or lived near a farm, it's not pretty, right? It smells, there's a lot of issues with it. And you don't wanna live near a farm. We have to pass right to farm ordinances so that farmers don't get in trouble for this, right? But it's a necessity, it's food, right? So this doesn't mean, comparing it to a farm, because a farm is in a residential, I feel like this is a little bit different, right? There is odor and stuff, but it's not a necessity. So at what level should neighbors have to deal with those nuisance uses that they do with farming? So and similar to, solar panels, I know this is a little bit different, but they're like industrial uses. I don't believe that they belong in residential uses. They're not in character with those. I know a lot of times our hands are tied because they all go to siting council, but in this case, our hands aren't tied. So I think, we really want to look at, I'm not saying that we shouldn't allow it in a residential zone, but again, if it's an overlay zone, we can really look at, is this the right place for it? Is it a residential zone that maybe abuts an industrial park and it makes some sense? Or is it a, residential zone that has a park and, high density housing? Like that's treated very different. Is it next to an existing farm? Well, maybe that makes some sense, right? But it's not just farming because you're growing something, and farming isn't all that it's not the best use to live next to a lot of times. So we all know what that can smell like and look like.
But we need it in order to live.
But we need it to live, so we have to deal with it. But in this case, it's not a necessity.
That's a valid point.
Bristol, through the COG, do you know of any other towns that have regulations for macro cultivation?
I will find out.
I just wondered.
Yeah.
if you
No,
were-
I don't know.
mean,
I know that-
I assume Morris does. So they
I'm
have a
assuming
farm,
Morris
but-
does, and I can get those regulations. I've not seen any other regulation change come through our office for that, but I don't see them all. Rob does a lot of those, so I can look and
Yeah,
find
just
out.
something we could compare.
I don't believe there is off the top of my head, but I'll
Because, I mean,
verify.
looking at that operation, it's not pretty.
But I think that the two issues should not be joined.
No, they should be
Agreed.
totally separate.
Completely agree.
I think, personally, I think we should be tackling the cannabis facility as far as the sales first. That, I think, would be the easiest in retail, easiest for us to tackle.
Okay.
Personally, I believe. One of the things I would like to see is, I know the selectmen have talked about it, they're in favor of it, if we can get something in writing from the selectmen or the town managers. After we met with them and had a long conversation with them a few weeks ago, and we're not getting any input from them other than we did that night. And we should have something input. If they're looking to us to add this to our regulations, they think it's good for the town, there's a reason for us to add it. Give us something in writing.
Yeah, this,
Communicate with us, please, because otherwise we're here trying to make all these decisions for the town ourselves, and they're a board of 7, and they're listening to, hear more from the people than we do. So give us some of your advice. That's what I'm asking for.
Okay.
And I think that just addressing that 200-foot for retail and micro cultivation, it's as simple as, you know, taking it out of 1A, where it says no building structures shall be permitted, and then putting it into, into 2A as a consideration, that they have to provide that information for review.
well, first of all, Paul wrote us a letter with regards to the application for this cultivation thing. Like, there's a lot of money that's gonna come to the town from that, and we don't make decisions based on that. We don't. But anyways, and I don't think he had his facts straight. Because where are you getting money from a farm? It's, you know, this kind of a grow thing. And not that that's gonna motivate us to say it's good or not, but it just didn't make any sense to me, and he didn't explain it.
But the money comes from a social equity plan that they would have, not necessarily in the tax.
How mandatory is that, and how long would that last?
Well, and so if it's part of a special exception, that's all something that we can look at. My understanding is because we are a distressed municipality, the state, it will be contingent upon their state permit, so the state will have to also approve their social equity plan. It saves them some money in their permit fees, but it then gets invested back in the community, and it's as part of that
But
permit.
we don't know how long it's gonna last and what the projection is.
Correct.
But the social equity, doesn't that come with strings that says it can only be used in certain things?
Right,
It's
so they
not-
have to come up, right, it's not just into the general fund. It would
Right.
have to be a plan.
So, being it doesn't go to the general budget, it has to go for,
Right.
All right, so what's the consensus here? First of all, I think we separate these two issues.
I agree.
and
I
we should-
agree.
Okay, how about everybody else?
Just one question, the SCP, is that only for farming, or is that also for retail? I thought retail, if I remembered, was different.
SCP.
It's all SCP?
What's SCP mean?
The
So
social
equity,
equity program?
Oh,
I think
council,
the
council.
retail is just, the town is able to tax them 3% on
That's
all
what I
sales.
thought. I thought
That's
it was
separate.
only for the
The
farming.
social equity is
Yeah.
only for the farming, I believe.
Right.
Well,
Social equity, so the applicants have to submit, I think it was $3 million for an application to cultivate. And they basically are allowed to cultivate, and then I think they have 2 retail sites. That $3 million application goes into the Social Equity Council fund.
Okay.
And then the council disperses that money, but a lot of it is going towards, and I have some information, it's going towards building up the state regulators and understanding the industry. Some of it is being dispersed into grant programs, and we've had chances to apply for grants. I'm not sure if we have, or groups within Winston have applied for grants, but we do have opportunity to apply for SEC grants. And they dispersed, I think, $6 million last year to various groups that applied. But there is a portion, which you mentioned, Rista, is that the social equity plan that does give it back directly to the community, but it's for certain uses, is from what I understand it. I don't know if it's just cash. I don't believe it's cash.
I don't think so.
It's going to be something that has to do with improving or the sole purpose of why they're doing this is because we were disproportionately affected by the war on drugs. So it has to be along those lines and that theme of recovering from that deficit.
But it's not a recurring situation, is it?
I do not know.
Okay.
That's a good question, I didn't know
The
that.
Social Equity Council would answer that.
And to that point, even on retail, we do get that 3% back, but there are, limitations as where we can spend that as well. But that can be significant.
That's at the point of sale, retail
It's at the point of
only.
sale, right.
Yep.
So if we have a retail establishment in town, yeah.
All right, so how do you want to go forward with this? Do you want to set it up as, we're going to have a busy time in the next meeting going through these regulations, because I know how lengthy this has been when we put them together to begin with.
So if you want, I can talk with Jeremy and maybe we can put together a proposal for just eliminating that 200-foot. And I think that should be a little bit of a priority because I do know that there is a company looking to move into a location.
Exactly.
And we, even though, money isn't the sole thing we look at, we do want to support business
Well,
growth.
we'd like,
And want to make that avenue. So
Well,
I would.
And I think that would be an easy change for us to
Me
make.
too, so maybe
know.
we can work together and just think of a way to eliminate that and,
there used to be a nightclub to begin with.
right.
Car dealership,
That
hardware
was
store,
Bonnie's.
hardware store.
I know, that's what I mean.
Yeah, and the daycare owns it, so, we're
Well,
so,
and they're limited to parking there too.
Yeah, so
which
no,
is-
so-
Which is a good location.
yeah. So I think if we did that, and then, maybe we can look at a couple different, ways to address the micro cultivation, and over the next few meetings, narrow down what we want that to look like.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
good idea.
Well, that's good, I think you.
But I think if we can work on
Tackle it.
addressing this one
Yeah.
next meeting, so we can schedule a public hearing for it and get it moving forward, so.
Is that timing okay, as far as that goes?
Yeah, I think so.
So we should do that before we do the discussion on the regulations, though, so we can get the activity done, and then we can really get into the codification thing.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so we've got minutes from the meeting of January 13th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for our meeting January 13th.
Second.
Any discussion of the motion? All in favor? And I abstain, I wasn't there. Okay, the Connecticut Federation, this is this piece, there's a 77th Annual Conference Thursday, March 27th at Backwood Turf in Plantsville. $70 per person for agencies that are members of the, 80 for those that aren't. So there's a registration form, and there's the awards that are gonna be presented. So if anybody wants to take a look at this, you can send it around and take a peek if you'd like.
Jeff, did you send out the information on the Wesleyan course to the commission?
I'll have to double check.
Well, it's not Wesley, it's not at Wesleyan anymore, it's online. It's the Connecticut Bar Association, land use.
What, they've done that
Yeah,
every
well,
2
They
years.
usually
We
do
do it
that
every 2 years, it's this year, it's all virtual, it's very good.
It was last
I'm
time.
attending it.
Yeah, it was last time. It was very good.
I've gone to a few of them, and they've been very, very good.
They've had all the Zoom ones.
I know we have the information, so we'll blast it out to all of you.
Yeah,
I don't know, I
it's usually
mean,
a Zoom one, which is good.
Anybody else have anything else?
I just wanted to bring up, thank Krista for the program she put on at Little Red Barn that the COG put on. Very, very good, very well attended,
I'm glad
quite
you enjoyed it.
informative.
We had a lot of people from Winston attend. It was great,
More than I expected.
yeah, it was really good.
Now, do we get any credit for going to that? Because I see your email this afternoon, there might have been credit somewhere.
I don't know.
So the way that the statute is written is the municipality determines if the credits are sufficient and meet the criteria. So you attended it, so if you thought that, I mean, I would think that it would meet the housing requirements, not the housing requirements, but the training requirements.
I would think so. Is there
So-
some form we need to fill
No,
out?
no, but just that, because so as a municipality, you have to track everybody's hours, what they're doing, so if you needed anything for who was in attendance, if you wanted to use those, it wouldn't count towards the required housing or whatever they are, but the additional credits, it should probably count towards.
Okay. Yeah, we had a discussion about that just last week as far as tracking folks going to training, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Glenn yet, but since he's the keeper of the commission lists, if you will, we're gonna ask if he could just add a little section in there for our land use commissioners, so we could see where everyone's at, just have a snapshot of
And
that.
keep us posted about the timeline for
Yep.
So when
completing
we're gonna
this.
need it, when it expires, things like
And you've
that.
got the sheet that we made some changes on?
Yep, I've got it here.
Okay.
I'll
So
hand that off
he
to him.
needs to get that information. as
Yeah.
well. Okay. All right. Anybody else, any comments or? Okay. We just need to adjourn.
You see anything coming down the pipeline for us that we're gonna be seeing in the next month or so that informally?
No, nothing comes to
Okay.
mind.
Motion to
Waiting for the
adjourn.
Ice Age to end.
Ice Age, yeah.
Everybody's waiting for the Ice Age to end.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Give a second. All in favor? Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Save it for next week.
You got another whole hour.
As I'm listening to discussion, I wrote some notes.
No kidding. I'm sorry. I got,
Yes, I saw that. Isn't that great?
And I came. Oh, I know. I forget what day it was.
okay,
There was a vacant restaurant.
Good, good.
Might make sense in the long
That's
run,
awesome.
actually.
Tonight when I came down here,
Regulate.
yeah, freezer in the ambulance car,
That thing goes
just across the street here, on Jackson Street, between here and the ambulance car.
Windows